Hi, my name is Emma Merritt, and today I'm going to be talking about what to expect when receiving a hazardous waste inspection. So the first thing you're going to receive from us is an email including some important information, so make sure you read through the entirety of the email. At the bottom is going to be some documents. One is a checklist of the specific checklist we'll be using at your facility when we're at the inspection on site. And it also includes a document containing all required documentation that we will need to see prior to the inspection. So what will the checklist be requesting? So you will have access to the checklist pertaining to your specific generator status. For small quantity generators, this is 220 and 2,200 pounds. On the right-hand side, this is an image of what the checklist will look like when it is sent to you. On this checklist, we'll be requesting that you provide your registration and generation fees from the last 3 years, your waste termination records, posted emergency information, arrangements with local authorities, weekly inspection checklists and personal training records regarding your hazardous waste. The last 3 years of manifests attached to those should be your land disposal restrictions and any episodic generation events and universal waste tracking information. For large quantity generators, this is going to be 2,200 pounds and above. On the right-hand side is what your checklist will look like when you receive it. We're looking for some similar information here, so it's going to still be your registration and generation fees, your waste determination records, the hazardous waste training that is applicable to your generator size, which is RCRA and HAZWOPER for those emergency coordinators, as well as DOT hazmat training for those signing manifests. And we're also going to want to see those last 3 years manifests and the land disposal restrictions. Some other things that we're going to be looking for is your contingency plan and your quick reference guide that goes along with your contingency plan, as well as your latest biannual report, and your P2 plan required for large quantity generators. So it is really important that you send this information to us 7 days prior to the inspection. This really helps us get an understanding about your facility prior to when we are on site. It also allows us to address any questions we may have for you and for you to address any questions with us, whether that's regarding the actual inspection or the document and checklist. It also allows us to help you get in compliance before even stepping foot on site. So for manifests, a lot of facilities say that they have a hard time keeping track of all the manifests on paper in person. One thing that you're able to do is go into RCRA info, and as you can see in this picture here, it's going to be under e-manifests or electronic manifests. We're fine with you submitting the information from here and using the electronic form. So emergency preparedness. This is really important for all generator status sizes. So for large quantity generators, like stated previously, this is going to be the contingency plan. Something that this is going to need to include is the emergency contact, the evacuation plans, emergency equipment, and then along with that is going to be the quick reference guide with all 9 elements required need to be within this document. And this information will be found under 40 CFR 262.262. For our small quantity generators, we're going to want to see that posted emergency contact information in all central and satellite accumulation areas, those up-to-date fire extinguishers, spill kits, and spill control equipment in all hazardous waste generation and storage areas, as well as attempted arrangement with local authorities. So weekly inspection checklists. Some things that we're looking for on these checklists are the person who inspected its name, the date the inspection took place at, and the area in which the inspection took place, and any notes or corrections that were made during that time. These checklists need to be completed every week, and we're going to want to see those checklists when we're on site. So one thing that I want to make note of is that some facilities fear that if they make corrections or make notes of something that is not quite right in those storage areas, that it's gonna raise cause for alarm with the ADQ inspectors, or that it doesn't look great to us. But one thing I want to make note of is that it really shows us that you're actually conducting these weekly inspections, that you're aware of what you need to be looking out for, and that you're on top of it when trying to make these corrections. So incident and spill reporting. First off, if you ever have an incident or spill, make sure you immediately notify the ADQ Emergency Response Unit in the National Response Center, and you provide the information listed below. When we're on site, we're going to want to see any records of spills or incidences within the last 3 years, and we're going to want to look for the proof that you have contacted ADQ's Emergency Response Unit and the National Response Center. If you have any additional questions or concerns, you can also find some additional information on ADQ's spill reporting information page. So hazardous secondary material. Hazardous secondary material is hazardous waste that is going for recycling or reclamation, whether that is on site or you're sending it to an actual reclamation facility. So if you feel like you're a facility that is doing this or is going to do this in the future, make sure that you have all required documentation. We're going to be wanting to look at that when we're at the inspection, and that in my DQ that you indicate that you generate or manage hazardous secondary materials at your location. If you look here on the left-hand side, this orange unit is a recycler, and this facility is putting in hazardous waste that contains epoxy, resin, and acetone. Basically, the contents inside are heated up, which generates a solid hazardous waste that is disposed of as hazardous waste. It is then creating a pure acetone product that they will be reusing in their processes, and it is pumped into this black 55-gallon container. So this does qualify for recycling. However, this facility was not aware of the hazardous secondary material requirements and regulations. So if you feel like you have a process that is similar to this, that you just obtain the correct documentation and information applicable to this. For Subpart P applies to all healthcare facilities, whether you're a small quantity generator or a large quantity generator. I do want to make note that very small quantity generators have the option to follow Subpart P, but they are not required to. So these healthcare facilities are hospitals, pharmacies, long-term care facilities, and even reverse distributors. One thing that Subpart P does not at all pertain to is medical manufacturers or production facilities. So if you look here on the right-hand side, this facility is generating hazardous waste pharmaceuticals. There are two kind of waste pharmaceuticals: potentially credible hazardous waste pharmaceuticals and credible and non-credible hazardous waste pharmaceuticals. This facility is placing their non-credible hazardous waste pharmaceuticals into these small pill bottles before it is being placed into these black 55-gallon containers. One thing I want to make note under Subpart P that is a little different than other hazardous waste is that as soon as any hazardous waste pharmaceuticals enter into the container, the accumulation start date begins. So this specific facility that we were inspecting was not putting the accumulation start date on the containers when their hazardous waste pharmaceuticals were entering their bottles. So this is something I just want to make note of that is often missed with Subpart P facilities. So pollution prevention, P2 applies to large quantity generators. So if you are a large quantity generator, make sure you're submitting your P2 forms. The reporting requirements fall under ARS 49 through 962. Also make sure that you are filing an annual toxic chemical release form. These facilities that require a P2 plan generate an average of 1 kilogram per month of acutely hazardous waste or 1,000 kilograms of hazardous waste per month. So If you have any additional questions, our ADQ P2 page is also listed below. Now for the actual site walk. So universal waste. Some facilities get a little mixed up on what exactly universal waste is. So it's going to be your batteries, your pesticides, fluorescent lamps, mercury containing equipment, and aerosol cans also now fall under this. So there is some confusion with managing aerosol cans. Historically, they've been managed as hazardous waste. One way of doing this is puncturing and draining them. Make sure that if you're doing this and you continue to do this and manage it as a hazardous waste, that you are using the proper required equipment to puncture and drain your aerosol cans. This information is provided under 40 CFR 273.13. If you look here on the right-hand bottom corner, there is a piece of wood with a nail inside this piece of wood, and this facility was using it to puncture and drain the aerosol cans. This is not the proper way to puncture and drain aerosol cans and can ultimately leave people and the environment exposed to the repellent inside, which is hazardous. So another way you can now manage your aerosol cans is through universal waste. So this went into effect in 2020, and the accumulation is the same for all other universal waste, and there are no hazardous waste fees if you are choosing to generate your aerosol cans as universal waste. So satellite and central accumulation areas, it's important to make note of some subtle differences between them. So always make sure that you are accumulating your hazardous waste in up to 55-gallon containers in accumulation areas. These containers will stay in the satellite accumulation area until full, and make sure that they are stored with compatible waste. This waste is counted towards your monthly generation when determining your generator status. And also make sure you have all applicable emergency signage and equipment in that area. So if you look here on the right, this facility has a satellite accumulation area with all containers properly labeled, as well as emergency information posted and spill control equipment. For central accumulation areas, you're going to be able to store this waste prior to transport for up to 90 days if you're a large quantity generator, and up to 180 days if you're a small quantity generator. Make sure that all containers have the accumulation start date and are ready for transport. You're going to also want to make sure that this area also has your emergency signage and equipment. So labeling and storage. Please make sure that all containers have the words hazardous waste on them, and that they contain the indication of the hazard of the contents. There are 4 ways that this can be indicated. So this is going to be your hazard waste characteristic, your hazard communication consistent with DOT requirements, as well as your hazard statement or pictogram applicable to OSHA standards, and the chemical hazard label consistent with NFPA code 704. Like stated before, make sure that your containers in the satellite accumulation area stay there till full and the date goes on afterwards. Make sure that these containers are properly closed, in good condition, and have appropriate labeling. So if you look here on the right-hand side, this container is open and there is a lot of material accumulating on the container, around the container, and on the walls, and no hazardous waste label is visible. So labeling and storage for universal waste. Make sure that with universal waste, the accumulation start date is placed onto the universal waste container as soon as any universal waste enters the container, and that you label the container universal waste. And make sure that these containers remain closed at all times unless being actively added to. Now, this can be a little harder to understand what closed actually means, since some of these containers are cardboard. So what we mean when we say properly closed is that it is closed in such a way that if the container were to fall on the ground and the contents inside were to break, that the people and surrounding environment around the container would not be exposed to any hazardous waste or fumes. So some common labeling problems that we see. Please make sure that your labels are legible and accurate. If you look here on the right-hand side, this container actually did have a hazardous waste label on it, but it was spray painted over in blue, so we were unable to read it. Unlike the other side, the container has a label that is easily legible. We can read the words hazardous waste. We can see the accumulation start date since it was in the central accumulation area, and the indication of the hazard of the contents. So, container management. Please ensure that all containers are closed in a way that prevents leakage, spills, and fumes from escaping. So the container on the right-hand side, as you can see, there is a tube connected to the container with a completely closed lid. This ensures that if the container was to get knocked over or the contents were to enter the container, that no spills are leaking into that container. If you look on the left-hand side, this container is not properly closed with the proper closing equipment, and it is located inside a flammable cabinet. This facility indicated that since the container was in a closed flammable cabinet, that they deemed the container closed. But when we say that a container is closed, we mean the actual container itself. So waste determination and open containers. Make sure you're making a proper waste determination on all containers at your facility, even open containers. So this image here is at a facility that we're unsure if this liquid inside this 5-gallon container was hazardous or not. So please ensure that you are making a waste determination on any material at your facility. If you're having a tough time on how to make this proper waste determination, you can follow this flow here. We also have this information provided on our website. So hazardous waste generation and storage locations. We see a lot of areas that hazardous waste is generated and stored. So we're going to want to look through a large quantity of your facility. This could be flammable cabinets. Sometimes aerosols are located within flammable cabinets. Sometimes we see expired product or product that leaked that now qualifies it as hazardous waste. We're going to want to look at any rooms or closed doors just to ensure that there's hazardous waste in those locations. Sometimes we also see hazardous waste in maintenance cages due to just some general facility processes, as well as sheds and QA and QC labs. We see a lot of hazardous waste generated there. We've even seen hazardous waste stored in lunchrooms. So now the inspection is complete. What you'll receive while we're still on site is going to be an exit debriefing, going everything that we saw at the inspection that day, if there were any potential deficiencies, things that were corrected at the time of inspection, or if we have any recommendations. Within the next 30 days, you will also receive an inspection report. It'll contain a cover letter that goes over just some general facility information, the NOIR, which is the Notice of Inspection Rights that we go over when we're at your facility, as well as the actual inspection checklist and the photographic log pertaining to that inspection checklist, and an additional copy of that exit debriefing. If there were no deficiencies noted at the time of inspection, yay, you're in compliance. And then if there were a couple of deficiencies noted, then our compliance team will be reaching out to you to coordinate how to get your facility back into compliance. I would also like to note that we do have the capacity to give violations that are applicable to a violation on our hazardous waste program regulations, or if an administrative order is issued and a violation has been made on the administrative order. And if you have any questions specific to your facility or any other information that you would like to discuss with us, you can always send it to our general hazardous waste email here.